So when you love your wife, who is not here by the way, she's in Toronto, you end up watching a lot of romantic comedies. Okay? One that I saw recently is 500 Days of Summer. Anyone see it? Okay, some of you have it. It's a few years old. Kind of liked it. It had great depictions of our city, LA, especially the architecture. I thought it was beautiful. Well done. But there was parts of the movie I did not like. Okay, and I want to tell you why I did not like it. For one, it perpetuated many of the myths that surrounds love and marriage. Even though the film opens with this disclaimer, and let me just read it for you. The narrator has this to say as he begins the movie. Okay, and this is what he says. This is a story of a boy meets girl. The boy, Tom Hansen, grew up believing that he'll never truly be happy until the day he met the one. This belief stemmed from early exposure to some sad British pop music and a total misreading of the movie The Graduate. You guys see that? Anyone? The girl, Summer Finn of Shinnecock, Michigan, did not share this belief. Tom meets Summer on January 8th. He knows immediately she's the one. This is a story of boy meets girl. But you should know up front, this is not a love story. And for the next 500 days, okay, Tom and Summer will have a torrid romance, which will eventually end with Tom and a broken heart. And actually, Summer meeting a new guy and marrying this guy. It's an interesting story. And at the very end of the movie, by happenstance, they meet at a park nearby and they strike up a conversation. And Summer tells the story of how she met her now husband. And this is what she says to Tom. I was sitting at a coffee shop reading a book, and I looked up and I saw him, and I just knew. Tom says, knew what? She says, well, I was never sure about with you. But that's not the end of the movie. The movie ends with Tom chatting up a new prospect, and he's very hopeful. And so are many of us in this room, especially if you are single. Now that may sound a little alarmist, a little over the top. It's just a fun romantic comedy. Why are you killing the movie, Charles? But stories like this, like these, really wreak havoc in our mental sanity when it comes to love and dating, especially when it comes to our expectations of love and marriage, by perpetuating that there is the one and this holy grail of you just know when you know. When you meet the right person, you just know. We're all in pursuit of that holy grail, aren't we? If you're just joining us, we are in the book of Ephesians. And I have to say, we're at the pace of a geriatric slug. We're going a verse at a time, really. We're very slow about this. Today, we're looking at this very famous, classic text about marriage, about what it means to be in love and what it means to be happily married. We're at Ephesians chapter 5, verses 21 to 33. We're going to go ahead and read this for the next 5 weeks. So let's go ahead and open our scriptures to verse 21. Submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, submit to your own husband as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother, and hold fast to his wife, and they and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is profound, and I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church. However, let each one of you love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. Okay? That is pretty overwhelming. It would be crazy to do this one passage in one sermon. There is so much here. Okay? And some of you might be asking, well, why are you taking so long on this series on marriage? I know we're just at week 2, but you're going to take another 4 weeks on this, maybe 5. Isn't marriage much like swimming? You can't really do it well until you're actually in the water. Okay? And that may be true, but there is something to be said about expectations. If you are not expecting that marriage is going to be difficult, you will find yourself drowning, flailing at the water, and not succeeding at all. There are some things that needs to be cleared up before you get married. And those of you who are married, you have to learn to have expectations that are realistic. Okay? So I want to just begin by saying, whether you're young or old, each and every one of you have expectations when it comes to love and marriage. Okay? But what are they? What's setting those expectations? Is it your past experience? Is it watching your parents interact in marriage? Or is it a lot of movies, a lot of love songs that's sort of given you a shape and thought about as to what marriage and love should look like? Or are you letting the creator of marriage, the inventor of marriage, set the expectations for you? We saw last week that God created marriage, not some cavemen sitting around in a fire warming themselves up and saying, oh, I got an idea. Why don't we get married? No, that's not how it happened. We see from Scripture that it was God who created marriage. And so therefore, the implication is we say God knows how marriage is supposed to be. The implication is God has written the manual, and we ought to read it if we're going to succeed in marriage. Much like a car, if you were driving, you wouldn't take maple syrup, even if you're Canadian like my wife, and try to fill up your car with syrup, because you would destroy the car. You would put gas, okay? Unleaded gas, because that's what the manual says you ought to put in to your car if you're going to operate it. It's the same way. If we're going to succeed in marriage, we need to learn biblical principles. What did God say about our spouse, about what to expect? Okay, last week we looked at one of those first principles, and we said that marriage was all about submitting to one another. And I hope that you had a chance to work that out. Verse 21. Okay, submit to one another out of reverence. Other translations will say fear of Christ. And we kind of established that both reverence and fear are probably inadequate translations, because what we should really get from that word that we see as reverence is the sense of being overwhelmed. Something is controlling you, overwhelming you. And we said that that was the love of Christ. And it's this love that enables us to have awe and fear and reverence for Christ, and thereby giving us power to love even when our spouse is unlovable. That's what enables us to do what we call love philanthropy. Loving because there's so much in the bank that we have received from God. Today we're going to talk about another principle of marriage. Okay? And we get it from this text, and what we want to get at is at the core of what marriage is. We want to talk about the essence of what it means to be married. We're going to start by looking at the very definition of marriage. If you are young, I want you to sort of envision this for your parents, to see what this might look like if your parents were having this type of marriage. If you are single, I want you to think about what it means to be married in the future and what your expectations will be. And if you are married, I want you to think about how you can apply this as soon as this message is over. Okay? And what we find in terms of the definition of marriage, we find in verse 31, where Jesus is quoting an Old Testament principle about marriage, where he says, "For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother." And here it says, "and shall cleave unto his wife." The word cleave is very instructive. It's not something we use commonly today. But it means to be glued to, to be bound permanently, like crazy glue, if you will, to somebody or something else. Another word the Bible uses for being cleaved is the word covenant, which is unfortunately another word we don't use, but it cannot really be translated with the equivalency in the modern English. There's something about the word covenant, nothing in the modern English could really translate. So let me ask you this question. When is a marriage a marriage? When can you say a marriage is truly a marriage? When the minister performs the ceremony? The Catholic Church, and this is one of the things that we diverge from Protestants when it comes to marriage, the Catholic Church says only a priest can actually perform a ceremony, the rite of wedding, okay? And thereby validating that marriage. Protestants, we don't agree. We say the priest, the minister, the pastor, a justice of the peace, if you happen to be on love boat, even the captain of that boat can conduct the marriage ceremony. The wedding itself is not necessarily sacred because we believe that marriage was not given just for Christians, but that it was given to all of humanity, that it was a gift for mankind. So a church ceremony is nice, and you should opt for that if you are a Christian, but that's not what makes a marriage, nor does jumping the broom, as they do in African American culture, or stomping the glass. Is that Israeli culture? I'm not sure. Eastern Europe? I don't know. Or putting on wedding rings the world over. That's not what makes you a married person. What makes a marriage, what makes a relationship no longer just dating or engaged, but actually a marriage, is that two people are consenting to a permanent, exclusive relationship that is both public and that is legal. That's what makes a marriage a marriage. And people are always trying to redefine marriage, aren't they? That's in the news quite a bit. You see it, it's controversial. Today it's about same-sex marriage. But not too long ago, let me tell you, I think it was in the 90s, people were suggesting, because people were having such a hard go at it when it came to being married, they suggested that we should have what's called a renewable contract. Be married for 3 years, and then you have an opt-out clause. It's not working out. Sorry, sweetie, but I think I'm going to check out. That was the plan. People were suggesting that people should be married for 3 years, and you can opt out with no fault. Okay, sounds interesting. Some of you might think that's a good idea, but that's not a marriage. Even a prenuptial agreement. Okay, none of us really have money, so this may not apply to us. But Monday, maybe you will. It cuts at the core of the essence of what it means to be married by biblical definition. You're saying that I'm not fully trusting you, that you don't have right to all the resources that I have. Okay? It cuts at the root of the Christian definition of marriage. What makes a relationship, a marriage is a covenant. Permanent and exclusive. Done in public, not in the back seat of your car. Okay? Done before a community of witnesses who can attest to your love and your commitment for each other, not for 3 years, and not for parts of your resources. And by the way, this is why I counsel all people in premarital counseling that you ought to have a joint banking account. There's no need to have a separate account because by definition, you become one flesh. There's no secrets that you should be keeping or a stash in case it doesn't work out. I have something to fall on. That cuts at the root of the very definition of what it means to be married, that you are exclusively one and that you hold nothing back and you share all aspects of your life. This is why the most important part of a wedding is not her dress, okay, ladies? Okay? It's not the venue. It's not what meals you're going to serve your guests. The most important part of your wedding ceremony is the vows you take. That is what constitutes a marriage. That's what makes it sacred. That's what makes it biblical. And to remind themselves how important their vows were, the people of the Old Testament, the Israelites, they would slaughter an animal, literally take an animal, a carcass, and slaughter it in half and have people who are making a covenant walk through, Okay, walking between the two halves of this animal that's just been slaughtered. As if to say, if I break my covenant, my vow with you, may it be done to me as it is done to this animal. That's how seriously they took their vows. It was sacred. It was covenantal. The essence of marriage is the words, I will. That's what it means to be married. That's why marriage vows are never in the present tense. Of all the hundreds of weddings, and the younger people here may not have gone to that many weddings, but of all the weddings that you've gone to, have you ever noticed the vows are always or never in the present tense? It's always in the future. Okay, and you're saying with your vows, okay, what you're saying with your vows is not necessarily, I love you today. Because we can clearly see that on your gooey faces, okay? You're going crazy over her and over him. We can see that. What you're saying with your vows is not a declaration of present love, but you are saying, I will love you. For better or for worse, I am publicly promising before God, before all my friends and family, I will be there. 40 years from now, I am going to be there. I have made an appointment with myself and with you. To the very end of life itself, I will be there. That's what it means to take a vow, and that's love. That's covenantal love that we find in Scripture. And let me just say how countercultural, how utterly different, because our culture tells us it's not covenant, it's chemistry. That's the wrong C. You have to have feelings. You have to have a connection. And so I love you in popular parlance isn't I'm going to be there to the very end. It means I love what you do for me. I love you means I love the way you make me feel. Michael Jackson, I think he has a song, I love the way you make me feel. Right? And don't people jump on like the Toyota commercials? There's some line that they have. Sorry, I'm distracted here. Okay? And if you ask, as a guy, giving a counsel to another guy, how do you feel about her? Okay, what you're really asking is, do you love her enough? Do you want to keep going in this relationship? Okay? Romantic love is about feelings for so many of us. And it's widely held belief that finding this feeling with somebody is the secret of having a fulfilling life. That if you have this with somebody, you will be happy. Happily ever after, we say. Moreover, romantic love is something that happens to you. Okay? It's passive. You can't really control it. It's like falling into a ditch. Right? It's like catching a disease. It's like a foul ball. You get hit by it and you're disoriented. It completely changes your outlook. Okay, it begins incredibly focused on the other person. Let's admit it, that feeling of falling in love. And you say stuff like, I'll swim any ocean. I'll climb any mountain. But shortly after the chase is over, after the ascension or the diving, you find yourself incredibly self-focused. The focus is now shifted, and now you become a partner in this engagement or in this relationship where you're now demanding, looking to see if this person is meeting your needs, fulfilling your physical, your emotional, your mental needs that you have. And it's assumed that this is the kind of love that holds two people together. That this is what you need to be happy with your spouse. This inside feeling. This toasty feeling. Okay? And people say, who needs marriage? Who needs a piece of paper to be married? Okay? I have this love, this feeling inside of me. That's all I need. I love you. But the essence of marriage, again, is not a declaration of how you feel at the moment. It's not a declaration of present love, as important as that may be. But you realize that you can say I love you and not be married. And you may have said that to people that you're not married to, people you were dating. But rather, the essence of marriage is the binding promise that you will be there in the future. Binding promise of future love. It's not a promise to feel warm and fuzzy. Okay? It's not a promise that you will feel a certain way because no one can make that promise. No one can tell you how you're going to feel in the future. But rather, the essence of love is a promise that you will be loving, faithful, tender, cherishing, servicing, regardless of the ups and downs that is inevitable in this life, besides emotions, besides circumstances, through thick and thin, I will love you. That is the essence of what it means to be in a covenantal relationship. And this love is anything but passive. Okay, and I wish I can go into a lot more, but we will in the weeks to come. Okay, and you can see it in this text. 3 times, the men are exhorted to love. There is passion. I don't know if you're reading it emotionally, but Paul is saying, love, love, love your wife. And women are told to be tender, to be respectful, but it's not said in an exclusive way because we learned last week that we are to mutually submit. And we're going to hit that difficult passage not too long from now. But I'm not going to go into it at the moment. But look here at verse 25. Husbands, love your wives, it says. And that word, as you know from Greek, because it's so much more richer than the English, the Greeks had 4 different words for love. That word is not eros, which we get the word erotic love. Erotic meaning feeling, touchy-feely kind of love. And that's not the word that Paul here uses. He switches it over to the word agape, which is love that is patient, love that is kind, love that keeps no record of wrong, a love that is not easily irritable or resentful, and that does not insist on its own way. A love that believes all things, bears all things, a love that endures all things. That's what covenantal love looks like. That's what biblical marriage looks like. And I mean that there is no higher standard that can be given to men than the standard of loving in this way. So husbands, Jesus gave himself for you. And wives, Jesus submitted himself to you for the cross. And that is all to say, Jesus does not ask of you any more than he hasn't already done for you. That's all the motivation you need. Christ loved you this way. He submitted himself this way to you. But let me show you how covenantal love is so much superior than to romantic love. Because I don't think some of you actually believe me. Okay, you might say it with your head, okay, I get your point, but I still want to meet that person who's going to make me want to climb the highest mountain. Okay, this commitment that is inherent in the idea of a covenant is what enables romantic love to achieve the ability and the longevity that it strives for. You see, romantic love is not a bad thing. It's actually very powerful. It makes you do things that you otherwise would not do. But it's limited in its power. And it's this covenantal love that has to come alongside romantic love that enables a wife and a husband to be able to fulfill all that you desire in that romantic love. Let me explain. Okay? Remember the band Chicago? No? Anyone? Okay, the young people will not know Chicago. Okay? It's not just a city. There's a band. Peter Cetera. Do you know it, Ian? Just to gauge. Do you know who the band is? Okay, maybe not. Okay. So this is a little before your time. Okay? Remember roller skating? Okay, when growing up in the valley, I went to Skateland. I guess everyone went roller skating at some point. And it would be at one point in the evening when the DJ or whoever was back there would turn off the lights and the strobe light comes on. And it's just go and grab a partner and just skate around. One song that I really liked to skate around to was Peter Cetera's Chicago song, You're My Inspiration. Does anyone know? Okay, you're the inspiration? Some of you know, right? Thank you, Jennifer. Okay? How does it go? You know our love was meant to be the kind of love that lasts forever. This is why I don't sing, okay? But it goes on to say, and I want you here with me from tonight until the end of time. Right? And then it goes on to say, you give meaning to my life. You're the inspiration when you love somebody to the end of time. You guys know this song? Right? Some of you do, right? Now, how do we say stuff like that in our songs? Because that's not the only song that talks about it in those terms. Because those who are in love have this natural desire to bind ourselves to promises. Don't you see that? If you are in love, you are going to want to make promises to the one that you love. And this is why love songs everywhere throughout the world are full of these vows of eternal constancies. I will be there. I will be there to the very end of time. So a Christian marriage, a Christian vow, okay, by defining love as a covenant, is not taking anything away from romantic love, the passion and the feeling of romantic love. It's not that which makes you stiff and about rules and about duty. But don't you see that no one could promise that you will go on feeling a certain way for the rest of your life? That's like promising that you'll never have a headache for the rest of your life. You can't make that promise. As a husband or a wife, you can't say, I'll always feel this way. Okay? Marriage enables romantic couples to get what they hoped to achieve when they fell in love at the beginning, which is to love well, love always, and love faithfully. Isn't that why we croon these songs? Why we sing, I will be there to the end? When we're falling in love. And I remember when I was dating Grace, I tried to call Choe to make a dedication. I never got through. But isn't that why we do it? We have these feelings like, I'll do anything for you. I love you. Any mountain, any sea that I won't travel. Why do we feel this way? It's because we want to love well, love faithfully. And that's romantic love, which is unable to accomplish by itself. You need covenantal love to fulfill all that your romantic love aspires to. Outside of commitment, I'm saying that's not possible. And I have to, of course, go to one of my favorite authors, C.S. Lewis, who had much to say about marriage. And this is how he put it in Mere Christianity. Being in love is a good thing. So being romantically in love, that's a good thing. But it's not the best thing. It's a noble feeling, but it's still a feeling. No feeling can last in its full intensity. It's an old fairy tale. If the old fairy tale ending, they live happily ever after, it's taken to mean that they felt the same way for the next 50 years, exactly as they felt on the day that they got married. That would be hard and highly undesirable. Who could bear to live in that excitement? 50 years, or let alone 5 years, he says. What would become of your work, your appetite, your sleep? And Lewis adds this: love is not just a feeling, but a deep unity maintained by the will, deliberately strengthened by a habit, the habit of putting the needs of your spouse before yours, reinforced by grace, which both ask for and both receive exclusively from God alone. And that is so awesome. Okay? That's a long quote, but it's so awesome because you see what that means. You can have love even when those moments you don't particularly like your spouse. Even if you're not feeling very good about what your spouse is doing, don't you see, if it's not contingent on how you feel at the moment, if you're not a slave to your feelings or the chemistry, don't you see you can still love? Don't you see how this love is far more superior and it really gives value to even romantic love? Okay? Being in love is the promise of fidelity to the end of time. And I'm not saying you don't need feelings. Some of you will say, well, I can't just marry anyone. Of course not. Okay? In fact, I don't like it when people, pastors like myself, say, love is not a feeling, it's a duty. That just sounds like a root canal, right? I don't want to equate my love in marriage to visiting a dentist, okay? No offense, John. I don't know if he's here. It's not just a decision. There has to be a feeling. Okay? And we shouldn't say, just suck it up and marry anybody. He's a Christian. He makes a decent living. No. Okay? There does have to be a spark. Thank God. You have to have a spark. But the explosion of that romance, okay, it starts the engine, but once the engine is started, it's this other love, covenantal love, agape love, that marriages are run on. Don't you see? You need it. You certainly need to start the engine, but you need something greater than how you feel or how that person makes you feel at the moment. And I hope that you see that covenantal love is what allows you to have what romantic love is always seeking. To love well, to love forever. Okay? I love you. Any mountain, any ocean. That's covenantal love that painstakingly will go to the top of that mountain, to the far ends of this earth because of love. That's what you need. And that's so much better if you think about it. So much more truer. Because let's be honest, when you fall in love, there is... By the way, I'm thinking about that song, Chicago, I just tried to sing to you. I sang a lot better in practice. So I'm a little disappointed in myself that I didn't sing it as well. Just couldn't catch the right pitch. But it's so much better. But if you realize if you're only going on romantic love and you need chemistry to make sure that you're in the right relationship, don't you see that there's always this lurking suspicion? What if my spouse or my significant other jumps ships and finds someone else who gives them more chemistry? That's a terrible thought. Terrible thought to be living with. Or better yet, if it's about being true and being yourself in a covenantal marriage, okay, you can be yourself. You can be yourself for change. And that's the beauty of a wedding day, your vows. It gives you security. It gives you the right and the ability to be yourself, the permission. But what you're really saying with your vows is, look, I am ready to see the good, the bad, and the ugly. Okay, remember last week we talked about the biggest problem in marriage is self-centeredness. I am ready to share with you my good, my bad, and my uglies. And I know that it's safe. I know that my uglies won't make you run the first chance you get. This is the place in a covenantal marriage where you can be yourself, where you can remove the makeup, literally and figuratively, and just be yourself and be accepted for who you are. There is nothing equal in any relationship where you have the freedom, the liberty to be yourself and be fully embraced. That's what marriage offers us. That's the genius of God's gift to mankind, marriage. So by this definition, if you keep this in mind, if you ask me, remember I told you guys not too long ago how Grace was very aggressive on our first date and she held my hand? Okay, I can talk all this trash about Grace. She's not here today. Remember I told you that she just, she couldn't resist and she held my hand. Okay, so if you were to ask me cynically today, well, Charles, does holding your wife's hand today, 13 years later, okay, does it feel the same way? Do you still have that electricity that runs up your arm? Okay, that makes you all sweaty and nervous and all feeling good at the same time. Does it still give you that kind of passion, that kind of electricity? Okay, and my answer to you would be no. And I would hope not. I would hope not, because don't you see that chemistry, that moment of pleasure, that wasn't actually about Grace. That was actually about me, my ego. Somebody who I think is so great and so wonderful is into me. Is into me. And is meeting one of the greatest needs that every person has. The need to be accepted and liked and enjoyed. It was largely about myself, don't you see? But after 9 years of being married, 13 years of being together, if holding her hand is still about me, how shallow and deficient our relationship would be. But now, after 9 years of struggling together, fighting, growing, and arguing, and loving, and having 2 children together, and trying to build a home, trying to live for Christ, after struggling through that and enjoying the successes of life and the difficulties and the hardships that come along with it, after 9 years of that, if holding her hand does not give me electricity, but gives me a different kind of passion, a passion that says, of course, I would do anything for her. I love her, and she loves me. Of course, I would go to the ends of the world. Don't you see that's a passion too? Perhaps not so feely, but it's still a passion. What kind of passion says, I will die for you? Isn't that of the greatest of passions? I know men in this room who would say that about their spouses. I could die for her. I can die for my kids. Where does that passion come? It comes from living and growing and fighting and arguing. A love that is so much more rich than how I feel, how she makes me feel. So much more powerful than tingling sensations that run up my spine. So much more rich. I want you to know the thrill, the thrill of this person liking me is not comparative. It's not comparable. You cannot compare it to the thrill of truly, truly, truly loving one another. Truly accepting one another. Truly, truly knowing one another. There is nothing like it. Holding hands is nice, but there's nothing like the security and being accepted and being loved by somebody who knows you the best. That's passion too. That's the passion that you need to go after. So, then here is the value of marriage. Let me tell you what it is. If you love this way, this is what this is why I believe God gave us marriage. Marriage teaches us how to love each other, how to love one another. That's the value of being married. That's the real drama. The rest of the story that movies don't tell you about, the adventure of learning and living in love. Okay? And so that brings me back to what we started with, 500 Days of Summer. People get the impression from movies like this that when you meet the right person, you just know. You just know, right? Right? I mean, that's what we say. If you marry the right person, you go on being in love forever. You'll have those strong feelings of affection. And when you don't have those feelings, well, this might prove to you that you married the wrong person. That you need to find your way out, that you need to change. But what I'm saying is, the real thrill of marriage, the real happily ever comes on the far side of marriage, that is commitment. That's where real happily ever comes. When you are so committed to each other. That's the experience that we are called to when we are married. And that means, if I can make a quick application to that, if you are married, you never get to ask the question, did I marry the right person? And believe me, every single one of us who are married in this room have asked that question. Especially when you first started fighting. You're happily ever after what's a lot of yelling and arguing. Of course you ask that question. Did I marry the right person? Is this the right thing for me? Do I need to find an exit out? Of course we have struggled with those questions. But if you are married, and we're defining marriage and truly happily ever after by commitment, by covenantal love, you can never allow yourself to ask the question, did I marry the right person? Take those words, and just put it in the trash can. It is not helpful for you. It is not helpful for your spouse. It is not healthy for your marriage. There is nothing to be gained by wondering after you have made your vows, after you have exchanged your vows. Much healthier than questioning your choice is learning to love the other. That's what it means to be married, to have taken vows with your spouse, to truly love as Christ loved the church. Okay, you have made the choice that's following through on how do I love this person. That's what it means to truly be married. Okay, and I want to say that because, let's be honest, too many of us are going our separate ways after having said our vows. And I want you to remember this, young people, because you might come upon that crossroad and you might need a reminder. And before it's too late, I want to say it is never too late. Let me tell you a character from Patchwork Planet. Patchwork Planet is a book Ann Tyler, she wrote. She has a character by the name of Barnaby who is 30 years old and he is recently divorced. And he discovers a little too late for himself the secret of marriage. And this is what he says. He finds himself in an ironic twist at an odd-end job where he is moving things for exclusively senior citizens. So he's encountering people who he says are married, have been married forever, 30, 40, 50, some 60 years. Couples who lived a lifetime together. Okay, and this is what he observes when he is interacting with these people. His name is Barnaby Gatlin. They be filling each other's faulty memories, dealing with the daughter's suicide, a grandson's drug addiction, and I was beginning to suspect it made no difference whether they married the right person. Okay, just picture this. He's looking at these people, and these are the thoughts that's going through his mind. Finally, you're just with who you are with. You sign on with her, put in a half century with her, grown to know her, as well as yourself, or even better. And she's become the right person, the only person. I wish, and this is what kills me, someone would have told me this earlier. I would have hung on then. I swear I would have. I would not have driven her to leave me. Isn't this why we know, we sense? When you see two 75-year-olds holding hands and walking in the park, isn't that the sexiest thing? Isn't that what we all aspire to when we prepare for that big wedding day? How are we going to get to 75? Holding hands, massaging each other's arthritis, and watching our grandkids running around in the front yard and thinking you're at Disneyland once again. How are we going to get to that chair? You do it by covenant. You do it by committing to one another and realizing that feelings come and go. That what you really need is the commitment that God is calling you to. Some of you might be saying, yeah, I really want to love my spouse this way. I really do. But it's not so easy. It's hard. You don't know my spouse. Well, remember where this is all rooted. It's rooted in being filled with the Holy Spirit, which is another way of saying you cannot do this by yourself. You need the gospel. You need gospel power at the very center of your relationship with your spouse to be able to love this way and not depend on how your spouse is making you feel. Because sometimes it's just not good. Sometimes you're not seeing eye to eye, and your spouse is awfully selfish and thoughtless. How do you do that? How do you love a person like that? You do it by gospel power. And that's why the Bible calls your relationship to Jesus, calls it a marriage. Jesus himself compares himself to a bridegroom. Your relationship to God is a marriage. He says, I have taken a vow, made a covenant with you. I will be there through thick and thin. I will go to any mountain, travel any sea to show you how much I love you. He says, I will be faithful, for richer or poorer. I will be constant. I will be there to the very end. That's his covenant with us. And even when we don't keep our side of the covenant, even when we are playing the harlot, Jesus comes alongside us, reminding us of that covenant, of his love for us, to the point that he would be torn in half, to the point that he would be sacrificed to demonstrate our love. Jesus shows us the truth about love and marriage. And the cross shows us what that truth looks like and what it costs. This is what love looks like. And on the cross, Jesus did not say, wow, you make me feel so good. He did not say, you're just the body type I was looking for. That's not the way Jesus loves us. And that's not the way we ought to love our spouses. So let me just end by saying, whether you are in pain because of your marriage, or whether you are lonely because you are single, let the grace of God be your balm. Let it soothe your soul and comfort your wounds. Go to him and find that he is all that you need. And for you who are hopeless romantics, hang on to that seed, because you know what? As great as the best of romances and best love stories and marriages are in this world, that only is a signpost, an arrow to a greater romance, a greater marriage you are to have with Christ Jesus. Hang on to that seed. You will be ultimately, utterly fulfilled when Christ comes and when you will participate in the marriage of the Lamb. We, his church, are his bride, and he is our groom. And only in Christ Jesus we will have all that we want, individually and as a couple. We look to him today, and we ask that he gives us an understanding.